Alrighty. Well, welcome back, everyone. Today we have a very special guest. Nate, thank you so much for taking the time today, joining us. I know we were just talking about before we hit record how it's like a very busy week. Super Bowl is this Sunday at the time that we're recording, and Valentine's Day is following up shortly, which you mentioned is your Super Bowl week. So thank you for joining. I'm going to have you do a quick intro just of yourself, and then we'll get into everything strategy for Raaka Chocolates.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mariah. Yeah, I'm Nate Hodge. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Raaka Chocolate. We make chocolate from bean to bar out of a small but growing facility in Red Hook, Brooklyn, and one of the more industrial, sort of off the map parts of New York City.
Wonderful. Thank you. You had that down packed. That was so great. Can you tell us about like your background, why you wanted to start a company, like Bean to Bar? What was kind of the inspiration behind Raaka?
Sure. So personally, I'm always someone who's been very interested in food. Like my background is pretty basic, millennial, liberal arts, directionless. But always interested in food. Worked at a brewery in college. Sold some homemade sauces, various other things on the side. Um, I met the other co-founder, Ryan Cheney, in New York City in 2010, and he was already sort of down the rabbit hole with this business, but had a lot less of like culinary background interests. Like his interest was primarily in like social initiatives
Mm.
and building businesses that treat people better at every step of the process. And so we sort of bonded over that, this idea that, business in coming out of the 2008 recession, business was sort of seen as a very unknoble profession compared to some other professions.
More traditional. Yeah.
Yeah, so we sort of saw that as an opportunity to be like, okay, well, what if we build a company specifically in CPG, specifically in a segment of CPG that has a supply chain that, like, in its to put it nicely, is opaque, and to put it more bluntly, is like downright exploitive in some not so rare instances. In addition to that, I think chocolate is just one of those things that is so fascinating, given its history, given the geography of it, given how little consumers, especially ourselves, but everyone we talk to, given how little is known about how it's made, where it's come from, like the bigger sort of geopolitical ramifications of like the cocoa trade and how it ties to all these other important pieces of history and global economics. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying, like, there was sort of a lot there
Hmm. Yeah.
when when we started to like peel back the onion, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. You just gave like an awesome synopsis of what I want to dive into, like all those
Yeah.
different topics. Yeah, I have to admit, so I, of course, was looking through your guys' website, familiar with it, and with your brand. And I have to tell you that the first time I looked on the website, I was like, I don't think I've ever seen the fruit that chocolate,
Yeah.
like cocoa, comes from. I was
Yeah.
like, for someone who eats it a lot, and I spoke to this, like, I'm a chocolate lover. I've spoken to it before on the podcast. Like, I was like, that just goes to show you, really, like, me picturing the whole process. It's admittedly so like naive to the whole thing, right? So I found myself like reading all your articles and like just diving into it, I was like, wow, yeah, there's just so many different aspects that I just don't know just from not being in like the CPG business.
Right.
But just like from a consumer standpoint, like I'm the same way with like Willa's oat milk, and we had Board Cow. They're a animal free dairy milk. And
Yeah.
so like just the industry in general and how it's changing and being and having a more sustainable approach and all these wonderful things. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, that really it's switched my perspective on like from the consumer standpoint, which is so interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean it's such a fascinating, it's one of the things that like our how far we are from our
Mm-hmm.
food is one of the things that makes uh that's like beneficial to the US economy in some ways, but also what makes it like so terrifying to go
Yes,
to the
yeah.
grocery store and to try to like grocery shop without like having all this anxiety about like what's in all of the products that we consume. I mean, it's something that really does feel like distinctly uh if not North American, like definitely distinctly something in the US that is not necessarily true in a lot of other places in the world, where there is more connection to your food. So I think that's one of the things that drives me for sure. It's like is like having this connection to the ingredient, and this
Mm-hmm.
connection to the process. And like trying to be as authentic about that as possible in the way that we like communicate with our customers.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think it shines through in your brand, and I want to talk about that in a little bit. But I know just I think there's also like an awareness or wanting to know more about your food. Like it's becoming socially I don't want to say like it's a social trend because it sounds like it's going to go away, but it's becoming way
Yeah,
more of a normal process to like go through and be like, okay,
absolutely.
what is in how is our food being processed? And I know I've seen just through social media of whether it's an influencer or just like through word of mouth, someone saying like, hey, I went to Europe for like six
Right,
months or 6 weeks and their food is just of better quality. And like
right,
my, whatever health issue they were struggling with before, like seems to basically be gone. And then when I came back to the US, it was here again.
yeah,
So just really interesting. And I want to get into the process. I know you had said that Ryan, the other co-founder, was just very interested in like the actual process of food and like those like from a strategy standpoint, but from a sustainability standpoint as well. So can you go into more detail for our listeners around like um the bean to bar process and like the transparent trade that you all commit Raaka to?
yeah, absolutely. So the trade model that we use is one that we've been sort of key in developing, which is a transparent trade model. And what the key proposition of transparent trade is like sort of freedom from the market in a
Mm,
sense, right? So like when you look at other certifications like fair trade or Rainforest Alliance, those premiums that are paid on those do a good job at raising the floor for farmers, but it's still a mechanism of commodity trade. So
okay.
cocoa might be $2.75 a kilo one year, and a farmer is getting paid, $3.25 with a fair trade premium, right? But if the market goes down, their premium also in most instances would go down because it's still a function of the market. And so with our trade model, like the thing that we are trying to do, like sort of separate from certifications, is say like, okay, we know that we want to work with this group in Tanzania, like for the long term. And we know that in order for those farmers to be able to continue the lifestyle, for it to be something they want to pass on to their children, et cetera, like there needs to be an understanding that the income coming into the household is going to be the same or
Mm-hmm.
greater year after year. Obviously there's cataclysmic events that can happen with weather and whatnot. But so that's one of the things that like we're trying to educate our consumers about, right? Like if any of us went into our job, our performance review in January of 2023, and our boss told us, well, you did a great job this year, but we're going to have to cut your salary by 20%. Most of us would be like, all right, well, I'm going to
I'm
get
gonna
on
go.
LinkedIn, I'm going to get on whatever and try to find myself a new job. So for a subsistence farmer that is growing cash crop in order to take care of education, healthcare, whatever other basic needs their family needs, they really don't have much of a choice other than to just make less money that year,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And then in certain regions, there's also an environmental impact that can take place when the price goes down, right? So a farmer can choose to cut down their cacao to plant something else like pineapple, right? Pineapple is going to turn the soil super acidic and imbalanced within under 5 years. And then they're going to have to regenerate that soil to grow more pineapple or to do whatever. Whereas like in a on a farm that grows cacao that's managing a canopy, you can have really balanced soil and grow cacao for years and years and years. So it's not just like the
Mm.
farmer's environmental impact, it's like the loss of forest that's coupled with the farmer not being able to grow to grow stuff. So it's like there's a lot of things downstream of like sort of the economic sustainability of growing cacao, or there's environmental impact that's downstream from the economic sustainability. So what our model really is about is, okay, let's build these long-term relationships and let's make a commitment to stabilize the cacao market in the regions that we're purchasing from.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for walking us through it. So, is part of is like one goal of the model to have others in the space also adopt that model so that it's like not just stabilizing the companies or the farmers that you're working with, but that like it becomes a normal process or a normal approach to the cacao industry? Or is it like just we want to commit to this and we hope like if others did it, it would be great. Um, what's
Yeah,
kind of the thought there?
yeah. I mean, we definitely want to commit to it. I mean, and grow and realize that the biggest impact we can have is growing the business so that we can buy more
Yeah.
cacao, so that we can stabilize more of that income for more farmers. Um, uh, and mostly for us, like uh, it's you don't want to be naive in saying that like, oh yeah, that we're gonna like globally disrupt
Change the
the
world.
cocoa
Yeah.
market and like what the ramifications of that like actually look like and the amount of impact that that has. But I think a part of it for us and part of the thing that we really like and part of where the transparency comes in is like being both transparent about what you know and what you don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like
Yep.
we know that in like some specific instances, like this has a really positive impact, and we want to continue to do that. And also, like we also want to share the knowledge that we have and the knowledge that we've gained about how this specific market like functions, so that you can think about that in terms of like not only cocoa and the chocolate you consume, but for anyone who's interested, like asking those questions of brands in other sectors, because what happens in like commodity agriculture is not specific to cacao. Like that's where we're doing our learning in, but there's so many other products and materials that are affected by commodities, and in a lot of cases, like it's unfair to the
Yeah.
people that are working at like the very basic level of getting those the very first step in getting those commodities to market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So also another question around the model as well. Because I like the little you have like a little infographic on your site, which this is so
Yeah.
detailed, but it like you're trying to stay above basically like the fluctuation in the market, right?
Yeah.
And so is part of that as well, like it kind of protects the consumer because you're like as a consumer you would be expecting the same prices, not like of one of your chocolate bars. Like you wouldn't necessarily see like one year if cacao was really expensive versus another year. Is part of the model to like protect against that, so it's like the consumer knows what to expect for like the prices?
No, not so much. I mean, our products are more expensive than the other products.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. There's no getting around that. Part of that is quality. One of the things that's also missing from something like fair trade are incentives for quality and paying for what the farmer earned, right? So like
Yeah.
one of the things we've been tossing around is like an idea that we want to like propagate in some of our marketing is the idea of like merit over market, right? Like this group of farmers made this amount of improvement to their post-harvest process, which is a big part of chocolate that we can get into, but it's like the fermenting of the fruit has so much of an impact on the flavor, and that's one of the reasons why we don't roast. So like there's that aspect too, that like in paying more, we're paying more not only because we think it's right to pay more, but also because we're getting a superior product and we're paying more for a higher quality. And like that's more of like what we want the customer to come away with than like any sort of like protection against price fluctuation. It doesn't mean our prices aren't going to change. Like cacao is only one of many things. You know, shipping
Yeah.
obviously fluctuates a lot.
Our world. Yeah.
Everyone's learned so much about that in the last 2 years. The price
Mm-hmm.
of cardboard for all of our cases and boxes that we use to ship the chocolate. You know, like all of these things fluctuate. So it's more the message is really about like in paying more, we're also paying for a higher quality, and our commitment is to make you a higher quality and chocolate product. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That totally makes sense. Yeah. With the quality of the product, of why it's a higher price
Yeah.
on Raaka itself. Which I might not have said this correctly, but I meant more like between year to year for like the
Yeah.
Raaka products itself. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, there's just so
Well,
many other.
we're paying so much above market anyway, right? So like
Yeah.
in like the lowest case, we're paying like 25% above market.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean our prices are going to be relatively stable within the year, but it's still going to be higher than what you know if you were to grab
A cheaper one. Yeah.
a Trader Joe's chocolate
Yeah.
bar or something, you know, it's like yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that makes sense. Okay. Also, a little bit of a tangent here, but
Yeah.
I realize I could look this up, but I'm assuming people like me probably don't know the difference. So, cacao versus cocoa is there like a
Yeah.
specific difference? This is more just like a fun little factoid.
Yeah.
Between the two, and when do you use them? Because I've heard you say both, and I've definitely said both just on this call.
Yeah. So cacao
It's like the
is an
bean.
agricultural product.
Okay.
And then cocoa is in most cases like processed in some way, whether you want to refer to cocoa beans as like the fermented cacao seeds, or if you want to refer to cocoa powder or cocoa butter, which has gone through some light processing in order to get those materials. It's really a matter of like agriculture versus versus commodity. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's what I could have guessed, but I was like, you know what? I might as well ask you while we have you on. Cool. Okay. So now let's talk about branding. I know we've mentioned it just with the importance of transparency and authenticity. I think we personally, just in the Malomo team and in e-commerce in general, have seen the importance of transparency and authenticity. So can you walk us through, someone lands on your website or someone's interacting with your brand, what messages are you hoping that they're taking away?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, like obviously we want to exude quality, we want to exude transparency, but I think the other thing that's become really key for us in terms of connecting with our customers, in terms of people understanding how the business is different, is like getting people to understand as quickly as possible that like it's like real people that
Yeah.
run this business, right? It's not some like big opaque corporation where they're not 100% sure like how to trace their product back to the like manufacturer it took place at and where those ingredients came from that got to that manufacturer. But like it's a relatively small group of like of real people. So we really want to communicate that in our website, in our social media, in our email marketing, and get people to like sort of engage with us as early as possible in the journey. Like in the last year, like we've done a lot of our own like sort of first party research into talking with our customers, you know, with the spike in a lot in like some changes to third party, changes to Google, and changes to Apple, the iOS stuff and Meta, all that stuff that was
Everything.
hard to trust your third party data, right? We're like,
Yeah.
all right, well then let's go back to the basics and just call up our top customers and talk to them, right? And one of the like analog, old school, like pick up the
Yeah.
phone, like literally. So one of the things that we were learning in doing so is that like, oh, people choose us because they like the product, obviously, because they think that because they associate it with whole ingredients and those whole ingredients being better for you and the transparency making them feel good about their purchase, but also because they feel like they're purchasing from like people.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we've like integrated some email flows. Like after someone's first purchase, they get an email from our fulfillment manager letting them know that she's there for any questions and giving them some facts about the company. And then on their second purchase, they get an email from me telling them about like sort of the mission of the company and what our team hopes that they like learn and take away from their experience buying chocolate from us. And like that's gone like we get more people than we ever expected that engage with those emails.
Right.
And yeah, I mean that's like the key thing for us is like we're real people who have real questions about this supply chain, who want to make products that resonate with that hopefully resonate with you because they resonate with us, you
hmm Yes. So I love that. There's so many different things that I want to talk about and what you just said. I have to commend the yeah, I guess commend you and your team because I do see that like come through in the website. And I remember so when I think of brands that are like people first, really, really, really doing a great job about conveying that to the end consumer, the first that comes to mind is Pura Vida bracelets.
know.
And
Yeah.
like just how they like I remember when I was like 14, right? My like first interaction or first connection with the brand was that they had all these artisans across the world and like their founders came back with a couple of those bracelets, sold them like very quickly, and they were like, oh wow, like we could make a business out of this. But it was always going back to the original artisans who were making those bracelets. And that was the like when I clicked through your website, that was the impression I was left with, where it's like you can see the farmer or the person behind the people behind the brand.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I wanted to share. And I also think it's really interesting that you brought up the getting the first party data. And I have to ask, did you actually just like call people up or like did you email
Yeah, we
them?
set out, we identified like what through like a series of criteria, like
Mm-hmm.
who we felt our group of like 1% of customers, our top 1% of customers were, and we emailed them back. And then from their responses, we called up a group of those customers that responded and yeah, just like had a chat with them.
Yeah, that's so
So
fun.
here's what, so if you're choosing to spend this many hundreds of dollars every year on chocolate, like how do we get other people
Yeah,
to want to
yeah,
spend several $100s worth of chocolate for a year here, and so
Yeah.
we learned a lot. Like, yeah, we learned a lot about not only like what people are looking for from us, but like what motivates them in decisions they make about purchasing. And why it is they resonate, why the brand resonates with them so much, and what we learned that like yeah they really admire that it's real people that they're talking to when they have a question, and they sort of like the other thing that was sort of a point of learning is like in sort of like figuring out how to distill the differentiation of our brand because there's so much chocolate out there. We learned that like people like us because we check like a lot of boxes for them, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
the transparency resonates because they know that means that the supply chain is fairer than other supply chains, and it's allergen friendly, and it's whole organic ingredients that don't contain a lot of fillers, and they like telling their friends about it because the flavors are interesting, um, uh, and it's plant based, but it still like reminds them of things they used to like eat as kids. So it's like it's checking all these boxes for people. It's like, oh, okay, that's really interesting. Like to think about like the idea of uh, like having to compromise values or
Mm-hmm.
compromise needs
Right.
for certain products, and the idea of like, oh yeah, we're not compromising so you don't have to compromise, and that's like sort of something that we're trying to work into more of our communications with prospective customers. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a win-win, right? Like no one has to compromise. Yeah. Um, so are there any, I know you just shared like feedback that you all got with those calls. Were there any like funny or interesting stories that like stuck out of why like someone is a top purchaser? Like, are they in a specific like profession or something where they're buying a lot of chocolate, or any fun, interesting factoids there?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, it really ran the gamut. Was I think the biggest takeaway for us is like
Mhm.
our perception of who our customer was and like sort of the diversity of who they actually are, um, was really surprising. I mean, a lot of people, um, there was a lot of people who had like really strict that had dietary restrictions
Mm,
around like sugar sensitivity or gluten sensitivity. Um, that was sort of like the biggest takeaway because that's something that we've long like sort of considered is like how much is like the health aspect, right, of chocolate,
yeah.
of like a sweet, like really matter. And it feels like it felt like there's a lot more people that choose the brand uh or like whether or not we want to like drop some like allergy restrictions in order to appeal to a broader set of people. But it seems that like, oh no, like this is really important to our top customers, the fact that there's options that are low sugar, the fact that there's no gluten or dairy, the fact that there's really not nuts in the product. So all those things like sort of mattered, and that was something that like we always kind of wondered. um yeah, I guess there wasn't anything too like funny that happened.
Totally fair. Yeah.
I'll recommend that that anyone who's like trying to scale a direct to consumer business, like there's so much value in taking the time to like find a way to like really connect with at least some small percentage of your customers on a much deeper basis, because there's so much more you can gain
Hmm.
from that than like relying entirely on third party data or relying on simple surveys. Like really talking to the customer is just can provide a lot of insights.
Right. I love that piece of advice for other founders or leadership teams. Was there any incentive for like for your top customers to take a
Oh
call,
yeah.
or more like tactically? Okay. Just in
Yeah, yeah.
case
So
people
we gave
listening.
people a So we have like our subscription program. So we
Right.
gave people like a 3-month subscription that either they could, if they were already a subscriber, they could gift it to somebody or they could use it for themselves. And then we also gave them like, I forget what the coupon was, but another coupon if they were gifting it that they could also buy something for themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I like to throw in those tactical questions every now and then, just in case someone's looking
Yeah,
to
I mean, yeah, definitely. You
explore.
definitely have to give some kind of incentive to
Mhm.
get enough responses for you to be able to. Yeah, no, that's a good question.
Yeah, just calling up people randomly, that
Yeah,
that's how you get people on the phone, right? Yeah. Oh, that's great. Okay, and then another question, which I think we'll go into some other questions that I had, but the emails that you mentioned after a first time purchaser and then like after a second purchase, one about just like from your what was it, the fulfillment manager saying like, hey, I'm here for you, here's some facts about the brand or about the product you bought, and then the second one coming from you. Are those how does that work with like subscribers? Do you normally find like someone throughout the customer experience is like a first time buyer, they try out the product and then subscribe, or is it like some people just go in head first and like start subscribing?
no, most people subscribe like pretty much right away.
Okay.
Uh, yeah,
Awesome. So then knowing that, is it like you're sending those two emails, whether or not someone's a
whether or
subscriber
not they
or
subscribe, yeah, it's
okay.
just a post purchase email that shows up like after the tracking. Yeah,
Right. Yeah, yeah. Makes sense. Um, okay, we'll talk about post purchase in a little bit, but before we do that, I wanted to ask, so we've talked about branding a little bit and getting that first party data. So how are you approaching like social media? Can you walk us through that a little bit? Also, we had mentioned it before getting on the call and I mentioned it in the intro, but can you walk us through like your busy season right now? Are there things that you're changing for Valentine's Day? If you're allowed to tell us, if you're allowed to tell us before, this will be published after or right
yeah,
before Valentine's Day, on the 13th. So can you tell us any details around that? I would love to hear.
yeah. So we definitely like we ramp our ad spend like a lot this time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Valentine's Day, it's such a big time for us. And like the we have all kinds of exclusive products for Valentine's Day, and a lot of those products like are like huge drivers for return on spend, just because like they're there's like an appeal to it this time of year with all the red and that makes it like
The
much easier
pink and
than just like a brown chocolate bar
mm-hmm.
on
Yeah.
an ad. We spend a lot this time of year um uh on ads on digital ads. In terms of social media, it's such an interesting question insofar as like it's so important to building brand, but in terms of like driving purchase, it seems like it's it doesn't seem like it has like a huge amount of impact. And then like the other thing that we're learning is like how many of our uh social media followers are like international people internationally that are really they're just interested in chocolate, that like
Mm-hmm.
aren't really prospective customers because the cost of shipping is so like prohibitive to them, right? So it's a great place to uh well, so like Instagram specifically, right? It's a great place to interact with other brands. It's a great place to like do giveaways and small collaborations. Um, and it's a great way to, our brand manager like takes pride in like responding to tons of comments. So it's also another way in which to like interact with people that are engaged in the brand. But in terms of like driving purchase, like that's sort of like the interesting, uh, yeah, like and where we spend our time and money, it remains like a moving target, right? Because also
Hmm.
social media, like the cycle, like we're only now starting to learn about like the life cycle of social media platforms, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like we're in this like this like the first wave of like learning about the life cycle, right? So that's been really interesting. And then uh uh we're doing a lot more white chocolate, and like white chocolate that's naturally dyed with raspberries or blue spirulina or purple yams. And we're finding that like that stuff is like really important for Instagram, but also like great for TikTok too. Like that, like
Yeah.
brightly colored white chocolates is like prime content um for TikTok. So I mean it has sort of um the evolution of social media has sort of like in some ways changed the way that we approach products and think about products as a means of acquisition, as opposed to, oh, well, we're only going to make dark chocolate because that's what best tells the story of transparent trade and the supply chain, to being like, okay, well, maybe we can get people in the door with brightly colored, uh, nostalgic, like plant-based sweets, so that they then want to learn more about the supply chain and engage with the brand in a deeper way. Um,
Yeah. That's super interesting. I would never have thought of the use case of white chocolate being
Being like,
being
oh, this
something.
is great. White chocolate's great for TikTok, like,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
If there's one learning I'm taking away from this, it is that.
yeah,
Oh
exactly.
my God. Yeah, that's wonderful. And I do think like this has come up time and time again with, and I love TikTok. Like I say it all the time, but um the aesthetic videos and content that is created on those brands of, if especially for like CPG brands, where it's just like pouring something in a cup and like making it look beautiful, like the drinks, right? Like, or and I am such the target, I am the target market for like these things, but like cake decorating and all
Yeah,
of those, they're just pretty to watch, right? Like, and I
yeah,
grew up watching all these baking shows. So I think it like taps into that just
yeah.
a little bit.
Oh
But
yeah,
like,
too. Like stone wheels, like
yes.
moving with like pink chocolate. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's
I'm like
it's
that is exactly me. I shouldn't be
yeah, exactly.
surprised
Yeah,
by
right,
learning white chocolate that's
right.
colored would appeal. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. And so a question for you is, when you're looking at like how are you basically, so you mentioned social media changing your approach to like products, right? With the white chocolate example. And so is there any point of where it's like, okay, we can tune out this maybe as like noise, or like this is not going to be something that we take into account. Like this isn't going to change the product because of this thing that we're seeing on social media, whatever trend or data that you're looking at. But like this, like the white chocolate example, could actually change the way that you're approaching the product. Do you have any idea, as we're talking about like just even learning the life cycle of social media, as to
Sure.
where like those boundaries are?
Yeah, I mean, like you don't want to lose what's important to the brand, right? And so like in doing more of these white chocolates, right, we found that we sort of were emboldened to do that by going back to our first party data, right? Going back to our
Mm-hmm.
first party
Okay.
data and hearing from customers that like that um that they really like the fact that like all of our products are plant based, and that like that was really important to them. It's like, okay, well, also there's probably a need in the market, and it's also within the framework of our brand to like embrace to embrace white chocolate as a plant-based alternative to something that people are familiar with, right? Like like people always bring up like the Hershey's like cookies and cream bar, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
like it's they're so gross. Like they're extremely gross, but everyone has like these nostalgic feelings for them,
I was
right?
gonna say, like, when I got those
Yeah,
as a kid on
absolutely.
Halloween, I was like, yes, this is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So like there's still nostalgia for some of these things that are uh that haven't sort of moved into the 21st century, right? And you might not reach for that product for a variety of reasons now,
Yeah.
dietary, like just the types of things you want to put in your body, like uh
After listening to this
the
podcast
flavor of it,
episode,
like your palate, like being more advanced. But if a brand like ours that you already trust as being like high quality, using whole ingredients, not using a lot of fillers and stabilizers, like that might be like a fun experience for you.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
um, and so
yeah.
that's like sort of how we're approaching it is like, okay, yeah, we can choose to it goes back to the issue of compromise, right? Like you don't
hmm
want to buy a chocolate bar and not enjoy it because it's like healthier for you, right?
Yeah. Then it's like, why
So
are you eating it if you don't like the
yeah,
taste?
right. So sort of embracing that aspect of being a chocolate company and being like, yeah, where it's inherently it's inherently sweets, right? And if it can still be like better for you sweets by using whole ingredients, by being plant based, etc., then 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 it makes sense for us to pursue that if it also helps us acquire new customers on TikTok by like helping us have more colorful, vibrant images and videos to work with. And it also like, for us, it fits into the whole like sort of scheme of the brand and that everything is really brightly colored to begin
Yeah.
with. But I
Yeah,
think that's
it matches.
the key thing is as long as whatever it is you pursue to get higher engagement on social media still feels like it's authentic to the brand and fits within the like vision of where you want to go as a brand, then pursue it. But if it feels like you're uh you know um you know
Like compromising or giving up on the
compromising your
brand. Yeah.
values or chasing a trend or chasing a shiny object, right? Like that's something we talk about all the time, like just organizationally, like, okay, is this really something we want to pursue or are we chasing a shiny object, right?
hmm
Then you probably should rethink it to make sure it's not going to degrade your brand or distract from like what your goals are as a company.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also think, well, you were speaking, I realized like my sister, she does not like dark chocolate, milk chocolate, anything except for white chocolate. So it's like also some customers might just not have a palate for darker milk chocolate and just like white chocolate. I don't know what it
Yeah.
is. I got the opposite of her where it's like any chocolate love. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense of like staying true to your brand and being able to have those checks and balances and like having your team all work together to say like, hey, is this something that we're chasing because of XYZ, or is it something that, we can still hold true to our brand and
Yeah.
can pursue like this new avenue? So was it for the white chocolate example, was it like just higher engagement when like as compared to videos
Oh,
with
it's
the
like
darker chocolate? Is it like night and
it's
day?
insane. Yeah, it's
Okay.
crazy. The engagement is like
I'm gonna
insane.
have to look.
People love it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go and completely just scroll and see. Oh my gosh, that's what my afternoon will be. I'll say it's part of my job. Okay, so we've talked about like marketing, branding, everything. White chocolate a lot, and I love it. So let's go back to the customer experience post purchase. I know we talked about the two emails that your new customers get. Are you coupling those with like SMS, or do you have an SMS strategy that you roll out? What's your opinion on like email versus SMS? Are they used
Yeah, I
together in
mean,
tandem? Everything.
really just started to do SMS like in the last 8 months or so.
Okay.
Uh, we like SMS has been super valuable for um like back in stock notifications for us. Like
Uh,
that's been huge. That's been like the best way to like sort of acquire SMS subscribers is through back in stock. Um uh Also like incentives for like getting early access to sales or early access to new products. Like that's also like proven to be a pretty good way um to get people to subscribe to SMS. So, we're sort of at the beginning of the journey in terms of like seeing how we can get subscribers to SMS. But those couple of ways have been really helpful thus far. And then the other thing that's been like on a post purchase or like a SMS email marketing thing, like strategy, like the biggest thing for us has been like segmentation,
mm,
and not sending the same number or same types of emails to our most engaged customers that we're sending to people that we want to re-engage with, so that we get less unsubscribes to our list by like sort of tailoring it to the customer and how much they're interacting with our emails to begin with. Um, yes,
yeah.
we've got a lot more engagement um, by sort of like segmenting our list into several buckets and being like, okay, this is a good message for these different buckets to get them to engage with the email.
Okay. Is that something you're revisiting like all the time of like those different buckets that you're segmenting people into and like the message that you're sending them?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the biggest uh like testing those segments is like absolutely essential to keeping engagement high. So I mean, yeah.
What are you like, can you go more into the specifics around like what you're testing, what you've kind of seen like work, if there's trends across like different tests that it's like, okay, this copy or like this creative normally works really well for us in these different avenues?
Yeah, a lot of it's like okay, well, yeah, it's like if we run a sale, right, that goes to most of the email lists.
Mm-hmm.
And then like what we were doing before is we were sending our subscription like flavor announcements to everybody, but now it's like, okay, this is only going to our fully engaged customers and our first nibs, our subscription subscribers, and then everyone else is going to get another email, maybe something with a recipe, maybe something with a coupon, maybe something about a new product coming up. And then there's like super unengaged people that we don't want to unsubscribe, but we do want them to know when there's a sale. And we're literally only sending them emails when there is a sale. And if they start to
Mm-hmm.
re-engage with those emails, then moving them along in the buckets so that hopefully we get them back to tier one, which is they get every email, but like sort of tracking that and moving people into different areas so that we can judge what kind of engagement they want to have so that they don't unsubscribe and stop keeping tabs on the brand altogether.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In some ways, it's like it's like not a guessing game, but you're just trying to use all the different things that you
Right.
have, all the data, and just being
In
like,
a lot of
are they
ways,
gonna
it's a guessing
subscribe?
game. Yeah.
Are they gonna unsubscribe? Like,
In a lot of ways,
yeah.
it is a guessing game. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. Okay. Well, we're coming up on time here. One of the last questions that we always love to round out each episode with is, what is one piece of advice that you would like to share with our listeners? Something that's, you go to if if you need to like reground yourself, or just like business advice that has helped you get to where you are today.
Oh man.
I
Uh,
know it's a big hitter.
I should have considered this a bit more. I mean, again, I'm just gonna go back to what I was talking about before. Like, uh which is like, yeah, pick up the phone and talk to a customer. I mean,
Call
if
someone.
yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're having trouble like trying to crack the nut on acquisition, you're seeing your acquisition rates slow, or you're like finding that your ad sets aren't hitting. Um, yeah, like call someone.
Yeah.
Like talk, figure out
It
what
could
it
be like
is
your
that,
support system, like your mother. Yeah.
yeah, like we were just talking about guessing, right? Like
Yeah.
don't guess when it comes to
That's good.
acquisition. Like figure out how people are, how your actual customers are engaging with the brand, and what that can tell you about how prospective customers might want to be approached, and how they might how they might how their journey to acquisition might look, based on the information the best information that you have, which is your current customers. Yeah, it was really eye opening for us, for
Mm.
sure, because it really sort of helped us in the post iOS. What it wasn't now, iOS 13,
Yeah, I think so.
in the post
I
iOS
think so.
13 era.
World.
Really helped us sort of like figure out like how to tailor our ad sets.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I hope too, since this is Retention Chronicles, I feel like I have to say it. You said don't guess for acquisition. I hope you'd also say don't guess for retention.
yeah. Don't guess for attention either. Yeah, I mean that's like another thing that I think like, um, we this brand's been around 12 years. Our web business has really been sort of like big or growing like the last 5 or 6, and I think like early on, like it was very much like oh well, we'll hope that like the product quality is enough to get people to come
Hmm.
back, and like
Right.
we're confident in the product quality, we enjoy the product here. We know that we're buying the highest quality ingredients, we know that we're taking care in the way that we handle those ingredients. That's like what the brand's all about. But there's so many products out there that are vying for people's attention, and so little attention that little attention that's left for
Yeah.
people to give, like to give a new brand that they come to face with, that like, um uh yeah, like learning what it is you want those customers to know about to take away about their first interaction with the brand, their second interaction with the brand. Like that's so important, uh, in terms of how you craft your retention strategy. And I think that's the thing that we've really been learning a lot about in the last 12 months, in order to better like plan what happens after we acquire customers. Because
Yes.
it's like so sexy to acquire. It's so sexy to acquire
Hmm.
customers, and it's a lot less exciting to talk about retention.
Yeah.
Uh,
We're
yeah,
hoping to flip that script, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Brand loyalty is so important. Uh, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I love ending on that note. Thank you so much, Nate, for making the time today. It's been wonderful talking to you. I know our listeners are going to absolutely love this episode. So thank you.
absolutely. I had a blast. Thanks so much.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it.